Although Muhammad claimed to have the sexual power of 30 men, it is also evident that he had a disregard for women, as reflected in the Bukhari, the second most important text after the Quran. It says the Messenger of Allah said that he was shown hell. And he says, I have never seen anything more terrifying than it. And then they asked him, why was it so terrifying? He said, I saw the majority of the people were women. They said, why, O Messenger of Allah? He said, because they're just ungrateful. It was said, are they ungrateful to Allah? He said, no, they're ungrateful to their husbands and ungrateful for good treatment. He must have been having a bad day that day or might have had a fight with one of his wives. But if you are kind to one of them, he said, then she sees that one thing and she'll say, I've never had any good thing from you. Now, interestingly enough, it's actually okay that a man's personality come through into his message, right? But when you label God said, the level of critique has to be raised higher, because there's a lot of people out there who are saying God said and it's simply their own thinking. So, personalities within messages are okay, but when it comes to the life of Muhammad, it's really evident that the strict patriarchal culture of 7th century Arabia made its way into the core theology. Now, okay, fine, the patriarchal family system of Arabia, remember, again, culture is okay, but when that culture is so enshrined in the religion, even to the point of advocating violence against women, that's where we have to have a problem. The Quran in chapter 4, Surah 4, verse 34, it says this, virtuous women are obedient, they're careful in their husband's absence because Allah has of them been careful. But chide those for whose disobedience, or discipline those whose disobedience you have cause to fear. Consider the words there. Disobedience you have cause to fear. Maybe they weren't for sure disobedient, but if you fear it, discipline them. And then it says, remove them beds apart, meaning refrain from having sexual intimacy. Then your final option is then to just beat them. Yes, that's what it says. But the good news of this verse is it says, but if they are obedient, then it's okay. For Allah is great and all is well, right? Literally, this passage basically says that women, one, are to be beaten if a husband is suspicious. And it also says that women are blatantly inferior to men by nature. Now, some Muslim Western leaders argue that those injunctions against women, they're cultural, they have no basis in the Islamic religion, and it was in that time. But there are other Muslim leaders who have disregarded the trusted Islamic commentaries just for the sake of political correctness. Because what? They're too radical or too anti-modern. Now, this is not really from any commentary. Surah 4, verse 34 is in the Quran today. So in our quest to find out truth about ISIS, whether they're good Muslims or hijackers of Islam, we continue to search within the source, the Islamic text, to come to our conclusion. According to Sahih al-Bukhari, Muhammad taught that women's intelligence and their piety were deficient. O Allah's apostle, what is deficient in our intelligence and our religion? They asked. He responded, is not the evidence of 2 women equal to the witness of 1 man? They replied, yes, in the affirmative. He said, this is the deficiency in her intelligence. Isn't it true that a woman can neither pray nor fast during her menstrual cycle? They said, yes, sir. He said, this is the deficiency in her religion. What's amazing about this is, given the above hadith, which is widely considered trusted in the Muslim world, one can see why women are so undervalued by the Islamic State. They're treated as second class. The Quran also states that women already married are forbidden for Muslim warriors, which is a decent boundary to have. I mean, hey, Muslim raiders, stay away from the married ones. Except, it says, those whom your right hand possesses. That's crazy. This verse allows the Muslim jihadi to own women as sex slaves. And ISIS knows this so well. One verse particularly that makes me raise an eyebrow is chapter 4, verse 3. And it says this, if you fear that you cannot act equitably or equal towards the orphans, then marry such women as seem good to you, 2 and 3 and 4. But if you fear that you will not do justice between them, then only marry one, or what your right hand possesses. This is more proper. That's what Allah is saying in this verse, that you may not deviate from the right course. So on the surface, this verse seems considerate of women. However, a very serious concern that I have is that the poor orphan girl is left to the mercy or the lack of mercy to a complete stranger. And in our day and age, compassion and mercy is such a luxury. According to this verse, the solution for an orphan and that stranger's inability to act justly towards her is to marry them? That's hardly a solution at all. I can talk about how a female gets half the inheritance that her brother receives, how a female's testimony is half that of a man's testimony in the Islamic court, just because Muhammad said so. But for my last point, I'll turn to your attention to Muhammad's favorite beloved wife, Aisha. When Muhammad married her, she was a whopping 6 years old. But the good news, he waited 3 years. That's when he consummated the wedding. So here you have a 50-year-old man committing sexual intercourse with a 9-year-old child. Let that sink in for a minute. So when we see the ISIS clan marrying children to grown men in Iraq, Syria, and Libya, and around really the Muslim world, should we be shocked? These are all things that ISIS has taken from the early Islamic era. And so the question I leave with you is this: is ISIS Islamic? So we'll continue this journey and compare ISIS with Islam's early era and its founder Muhammad. So be looking for the next video and use the hashtag and continue this discussion. Share these videos everywhere online, and you want to watch the next video, trust me.